And greetings, happy Tuesday. Welcome to the Steve Deace Show, and we have quite the show lined up for you here today. I am Steve Deace. Todd Erzin and Aaron McIntyre are here with me as well. If you want to let us know what you think about what we think, you can email the program, steve@stevedeace.com. That's DEACE. Like us on Facebook and follow us on Twitter @Steve Deace Show. Look for me as well on MeWe, Parler, Gab, and now Getter, GETTR. And if you're looking for clips of the show, head over to rumble.com/Steve Deace Show. Again, over at rumble.com/Steve Deace Show. We have a jam-packed show lined up for you today. I'll tell you about it here in just a second. But first, I don't know, those of you that follow me on Twitter, and Aaron, I know that you saw this last night. Of all the people in America that I thought was going to take a shot at homeschooling, yeah. I didn't think it would be a young man who nearly lost his life being trapped in a government school. But lo and behold, a young man who almost did lose his life being trapped in a government school. And I never can remember how to pronounce his last name.
Kyle Kashuv, I think.
Thank you. Okay. Decided to take a shot at homeschooling in America. And I can only tell you what I have seen in my home. In my home, 2 years ago, we graduated our first homeschooler. She's barely 20 years old. She leads the local nonprofit theater troupe here in town for the youth. She has starred in productions at our Civic Center, including The Lead and Hairspray. She's the youngest manager in her retail chain, in her national retail chain at the mall here in town. She has her own apartment, her own car, and has zero student loan debt, and is already making the amount of money that I didn't make working in radio until about 2 to 3 years into this job. So clearly, she's an example of the dysfunction that comes from the homeschooling world. Okay?
Lost child.
Indeed.
Sorry.
Indeed. Yes. Now, I understand, and I have said all along, I've even angered some of my fellow homeschoolers with this. I'm not a one-size-fits-all kind of thing. Having been born to a single mom, having been on government cheese, ADC, welfare growing up, I clearly understand that not everyone can afford to do this, okay? I absolutely believe it is the best model if you can, but I understand that not everyone can. And even though I'm a firm believer in it with our son, he had extracurricular activity needs we just simply could not fulfill from a homeschooling perspective. So we bit the bullet and came up with an extra 10 grand to put him in Des Moines Christian. So, you know, every family has to make their own decision. But if you are on the edge of thinking, you know what, can we really do this? Where would we get a great curriculum from? How do we make sure that if our kids want to go to college, they're still college certified? Anastasia could have got into college easily. Her grades were great. She was just like, I don't need to get 70 grand of student loan debt or higher for an English degree. What was, you know, or a business administration degree, which she just end up with the same job she kind of has right now, right? So if you're wondering, can we make this work? All right. There's lots of different options out there for you. You know, one of them, for example, is our friends over at Patriot Academy. Now, typically what they specialize in is Second Amendment defense courses, but that's not all they do there. They provide some outstanding constitutional apologetics on history, the Constitution, the rule of law, things of that nature. There's all kinds of great products that are out there available for you that you may not even know about. Their constitutional defense course will help with your knowledge of the Constitution and American exceptionalism. And also, you can shoot guns. Sold. All right, so if you want to register for their upcoming course, you can get 90% off of the training. They do this out in Nevada. and the whole family is welcome. You got to take care of your own logistics, but they'll give you 90% off their next training, which will be this fall. Don't worry, they're not going to do a training in Nevada in the summertime. All right, go to constitutioncoach.com. There's all kinds of other things you're going to find there, by the way, that'll help equip you on American history, American law, things of that nature. Constitutioncoach.com is where you want to go to get more information. Again, constitutioncoach.com. You can register for their next course there as well. All right, coming up here today at the bottom of the hour, fake news or not, and a self-described centrist comedian has put together a Twitter thread that is essentially a summary of the last 6 years of my life. How I went from, I know they're against me, but they're at least honestly against me. So I can be friends with New York Times and Washington Post reporters, and they can even be in my home as guests, which they once were, to don't you dare call them back. Don't call anybody back. Don't pretend they don't exist. Trust no one. And I'm now Alex Jones with Bible verses. How did this happen? Well, at the bottom of the hour, we will walk through a brief history of time. That is essentially my current career trajectory, for better or for worse. Next hour, Dr. Robert Malone is going to join us. He was the first man to patent mRNA technology. We'll get his read on what he is seeing with the data on the mRNA vaccines. And we're going to introduce you to a new term you need to know about called ADE. We will define that for you with Dr. Malone next hour. And then we'll get into Pop Culture Tuesday and where's the Olympic buzz at? We'll get into what that could mean or what it maybe doesn't mean. That's coming up at the bottom of next hour. But before we get to all of that, here is Aaron's rundown of what happened while we were away.
What happened while we were away, brought to you by Chaos, also known as Tuesday. Now, typically on the montage, it's made up of a hodgepodge of stories put in coherent order for your viewing pleasure. Today, not so much. To illustrate the chaos of a typical day around here, I'm going to put these in the order of which I flagged them. We'll start with New York Governor Andrew Cuomo saying some stuff.
Worst case scenario, a large number of unvaccinated get sick, and even worse than that, the Delta variant mutates to a vaccine-resistant virus. And now we're right back to where we started. Everybody has to get vaccinated again.
Andrew's brother Chris was busy on CNN blaming Ron DeSantis for something.
The question becomes, as a policy perspective, is how long do you allow the majority of this country, Republicans, Democrats, Independents, South, North, the majority of every group and demographic we have gotten vaccinated. How long do you allow them to be held hostage in states, let's say like Florida, where, you have the governor saying, I know it's breaking out. We're going the other way. Don't Fauci this, my Florida, no mask mandates. I'll let the parents decide. I mean, where's that messaging going to get you?
Senator Elizabeth Warren was interviewed by Teen Vogue, and she had this to say about baby murder, quote, "Both voting and access to abortion are basic. They're about the functioning of our democracy and about the protection of personal autonomy." The right-leaning Washington Examiner newspaper is requiring all of its employees to get vaccinated. A leaked internal memo stated that all employees were to send their proof of vaccination for COVID to the Human Resources Office by August 9th. A new congressional report will link Peter Daszak to the Chinese Communist Party's propaganda campaign about COVID's origins. Daszak is the director of EcoHealth Alliance, which used National Institutes of Health funding to in turn fund risky gain-of-function research in Wuhan, China. I'll remind you that Daszak was the one who emailed Dr. Fauci back in April of 2020, thanking Fauci for downplaying the possibility of the lab leak theory. By the way, that email was heavily redacted in the previous FOIA dump prior to yesterday, when BuzzFeed News' Jason Leopold was able to obtain the unredacted version. Part of the previously redacted section from Daszak reads, quote, "The work we've been doing in collaboration with Chinese virologists has given us incredible insight into the risks these viruses represent so that we can directly help protect our nation from bat-origin coronaviruses," end quote. Back to the congressional report, which also stipulates that the virus was, quote, "released from a Wuhan Institute of Virology laboratory sometime prior to September 12th, 2019. Top Biden coronavirus advisor Dr. Michael Osterholm has swung back in the direction of real science with these comments on masks.
We know today that many of the face cloth coverings that people wear are not very effective in reducing any of the virus movement in or out. Either you're breathing out or you're breathing in. And in fact, if you're in the upper Midwest right now, anybody who's wearing their face cloth covering can tell you they can smell all the smoke that we're still getting. We need to talk about better masking.
A rapper named DaBaby was dropped from the lineup this last weekend at Lollapalooza after a so-called homophobic rant. DaBaby is the genius behind such songs like Big Butt, Gucci Big Latina, and Pull Up Music, the latter of which is a song about being in a gang and shooting rivals. DaBaby subsequently released a statement, quote, "I want to apologize to the LGBTQ+ community for the hurtful and triggering comments I made. Again, I apologize for my misinformed comments about HIV/AIDS, and I know education on this is important," end quote. Laurel Hubbard, the New Zealand dude who set world records in women's weightlifting, is out of the Tokyo Olympics after failing his third lift attempt. In other words, the dude competing in the women's event was beaten by a bunch of actual women. Speaking of low T levels, Senator Lindsey Graham tested positive for COVID-19 yesterday. He says he's, quote, "very glad I was vaccinated," end quote. Checking in on the southern border, according to government estimates, over 210,000 illegal immigrants were taken into custody in the month of July alone. This week, reporters at the southern border in Mission, Texas, say they're seeing the largest crowds of illegals they've ever seen, all camped out under a large bridge waiting to be processed. Checking in on the TikTok crowd.
A lot of the people using kitty and pup and bunny self-pronouns are neurodivergent minors. It is a very common neurodivergent experience to feel a disconnect from being human. When this intersects, you get noun self-pronouns and animal noun self-pronouns. If you are not comfortable using someone's pronouns because you assume it's kink for some weird-ass reason, don't interact with them and just shut up about it.
Louisiana is reinstating a statewide mask mandate for everyone 5 years old and older. Last week, the Cleveland Indians announced they're changing their name to the Cleveland Guardians because racism. Problem is, the Cleveland Guardians are a already well-established roller derby club in the city, which competes nationally and internationally. Here's the Cleveland Guardians' new logo, and here's the Cleveland Guardians roller derby logo. Checking in on the Muppets.
We met the most amazing princess, but they ran away, and all they left behind was this.
Everyone, there's something I need to tell you. The princess who came to your ball tonight was me. I'm Gonzarella.
The Broward School District in Florida is backpedaling on its mask mandate for the coming school year after Governor Ron DeSantis threatened to cut funds if implemented. Daily Defiance, we head to North Carolina, where a listener to the show, Karen Carnes, spoke to her local Board of Education against mask mandates.
The flu and COVID-19 are transmissible in the same way, and we have never used masks in the past for the flu because they don't work to stop the spread. There have been no randomized or controlled studies that prove they work. There is no data to support the lie that children are safer for using them. There is, however, a lot of data to show how damaging masks are to children. And I'd also like to say that on a personal note, and I don't know how each one of you feel, but when I go out and I go shopping, I do keep my distance from people. But when I see a child just looking at me because I don't have a mask on, they have a fear, an unfounded fear they shouldn't have. And things have flip-flopped back and forth so much. These children, I'm confused as an adult because the story keeps changing.
Good job, Karen. And finally, here's what happened when Joe Biden met the son of Kentucky Governor Andy Beshear. For those of you listening, what we're watching is Biden awkwardly holding the hand of Beshear's 12 or 13-year-old son and handing him his used face mask. And that's what happened while we were away. That's the look I had on my face last night.
What? Is that real?
Yeah. I'm whispering like Joe Biden, too.
Aaron's montage brought to you by Arkham Asylum. Also brought to you by Home Title Lock. How much equity do you have in your home? You know, one painful way to find out is to have it all taken away. Cybercrime experts are alerting homeowners that the more equity you have, the greater the chance foreign or domestic criminals will come after you, because home title theft is one of the fastest growing crimes out there. And that's what Home Title Lock does. Stop you, help you to not become a victim of it. And if you become one, to get your equity and your home's title rightfully restored to you. Because thieves can go online where our home titles are kept, claim they are you, forge your signature on a quick claim deed stating you've sold your home to them, and then take out loans against your home and your equity. Don't let that happen to you. Protect your most valuable asset. And right now they're offering you a complete title history of your home to see how clean it is, if anybody's ever attempted to come after it or not. That's normally a $100 value. They're offering it today for free when you go to HometitleLock.com. Get that complete title history of your home for free today at HometitleLock.com. Now, we have some breaking news. This news just broke right before we came on the air. Letitia James, the state attorney general in New York, just finished a press conference and the release of her report on the sexual harassment allegations against Governor Andrew Cuomo. Her report and her statement today alleges that the governor of New York broke both state and federal law. That she specified that the governor violated both state and federal law in committing sexual harassment against multiple women. My instant reaction to that, first of all, I want to let me be the first, in fact, to congratulate Letitia James for being the 2022 Democrat nominee for governor of New York. Secondly, we will discuss this story in more detail in today's Overtime that will be available for subscribers. After today's program, we will record it for you and then upload it later this afternoon for you to watch on demand. And you'll be able to do so at blazetv.com/Deace. That's blazetv.com/Deace. And that's also where you can go if you're not yet a subscriber to get all of our exclusive content at a discount with a Blaze TV subscription. To the montage we go. And I have to tell you, you throw in the Cuomo news today. This is nuts. Did it feel like there's like a week's worth of news in this montage?
Correct.
Where to even zero in? You know what? I know where we're going to zero in. Two things. One, the Washington Examiner, last I looked, is a top 5 website in terms of traffic within conservative media. And they are now mandating the jab to all of their employees. Another reminder, if you think it's just as simple as the same folks who disagree with some Democrat policies as you do, mean that they're going to fight the culture war equivalent of the Marne or Iwo Jima or Gettysburg, that you're counting on that they're going to be there with you. Nope. No. I mean, it's not even a memo saying, hey, look at this data. We highly urge all of you to go out and get this. They just went right to mandate at the Washington Examiner. I mean, with friends like that, those aren't your friends, actually. No, they're not. So we're going to have something a little bit more tying us together other than opposition to a few Democrat policies. I know, like a willingness to do something about them, maybe. Is that a better standard, guys?
Or just adopting all of them.
Or just even adopting all of them and then attempting to impose them.
Seems like that's coming out of left field, Steve. Gosh.
Indeed. For the 14 of you that apparently have not paid attention here for the last 10 years. Yes. And I've got to go to my old friend, man. I just think he's adorable. Okay. I love me some Michael Osterholm. I do. I love that guy. And I first learned of him, when COVID began to break last year. He did a long interview with Joe Rogan on his pod, and a whole bunch of you urged me to go and listen to it. So I did. And where to even begin with Michael Osterholm. So the very first weekend when Trump announced lockdowns and the governors in the country went along with it, that very first weekend, Osterholm, and I can't remember if it was the New York Times or the Washington Post, but I repeat myself. Osterholm wrote a column that very first weekend talking about you can't lock down a country like this. We have to figure out how to live our lives. I mean, the societal cost of this on the back end. I mean, he was already begging the question. Is the cure worse than the disease? I mean, early on, I cited him actually quite a bit in my own skepticisms against lockdowns. But then a few months ago, didn't he admit that he hasn't seen people in his family or something for a year or something like that, and he's dying to see him? Okay. The line that putting on a mask to stop an airborne virus is like putting a screen door on a submarine. Do you know where I got that? I got that from Michael Osterholm, who was addressing the Minnesota Chamber, that's his native state, the Minnesota Chamber of Commerce last June, I think it was, when they were figuring out how they could reopen their state and stop taking a bath and losing money. And they said, why don't we just reopen everything, put everybody in masks? And Osterholm told them the truth, the mask won't work. To then becoming an absolute mask pimp, yo. Just pimping out that mask, all right? And then, he was asked about Fauci's dumbass assertion of double masking. To which Osterholm immediately dissed that and said, that's ridiculous. That's silly. It won't work. It'll just harm the person more than it will actually stop transmission of the virus. To then, when he was informed that it was actually Fauci's idea, I just think double masks, that's the only way to fly, right? I mean, he's firing up the ZZ Top, except he's not looking for some tush. He's looking for some double masks, okay? Back home on LaGrange, all right?
Is this real life?
It is. It is. I love this guy. I mean, I freaking love him. You know why? Because he's a dinosaur. Do you ever wonder what it was like to watch the dinosaurs go extinct in real time, right? In real time, to watch them, just to stand by and watch them go extinct, to watch this massive creature, this dominant of the ecosystem known as the Tyrannosaurus Rex, just eventually assume the position to be gone forever. What did it look like? Well, I can't give you an eyewitness testimony to that. But what I can give you an eyewitness testimony to is, you've ever wondered what it's like to watch science go extinct in real time. And for actual scientists to realize, oh bleep, I'm going extinct. And then attempt to do the science instead. And then realize, wow, I suck at this. I got into this for actual science. I'm not really into this to peddle a narrative. But let me try it, because that just seems to be where the market is at. And then they can't help themselves. It's a little bit like, I can't help myself knowing what the truth of something is and believing that somewhere along the line it is still attainable, right? Even though, Erzin, you continually try to break me of this tendency, of this habit. I can't. I must at least make an effort to find the truth.
But the same applies to me. This is irresistible force against immovable object.
Yes. Osterholm must attempt, his first instinct, over and over again. I fully expect that in a week, if not by the end of today, Michael Osterholm will be doing another cable news channel pointing out, or maybe even the same one on the same show, you know what, I totally forgot about this study that we did 10 minutes ago, that masks work, okay? This poor fella is an actual scientist. Now, since he has no real worldview plumb line, he's getting tossed to and fro here, right? The double-minded man is unstable in all of his ways. But you can see what over and over again since this thing began, whether it's lockdowns, masks, his instinct has been to revert to science. In fact, you'll notice there's an interesting little footnote in our book, Fauci and Bargain, pointing out that masks don't work. And this footnote comes from a study published at the Center for Infectious Disease, which is a branch of the University of Minnesota. It's a study that was, if I remember this footnote right, was in like April of 2020, even as the pandemic was underway, if I remember correctly. For those of you that are just curious, would you like to know? Come on, ask me. I mean, you probably have already guessed, but come on, I just want you to ask. Just ask me. Steve, who runs the Center for Infectious Diseases at the University of Minnesota? Somebody ask me. Just come on, just ask.
Hey, Steve, who runs the Center for Infectious Diseases at the University of Minnesota?
Thank you. By golly, I'm glad you asked.
Somebody super sciencey, I bet.
They are supercalifragilistic sciencey, in fact. None other than Dr. Michael Osterholm. He runs the Center for Infectious Disease at the University of Minnesota. And this poor guy is a portrait of what's going on in science in real time. See, let me tell you the biggest story that's happened so far this year that like almost none of us are talking about because there's 75 other big stories happening. It's the American Medical Association announcing last week that gender isn't real and doesn't exist. From the beginning of this, we have pointed out to you, when does the expertise end and the worldview begin, right?
Right.
I've asked that question. I think that was the first question I asked the first show when we began just saying, hey, we just think these questions should be answered before we maybe irrevocably alter our way of life and never get it back. And maybe you have good answers, and maybe it is a survival level event, but shouldn't these questions at least get answers before we all agree that that's the case? Fair? Yeah. And then about a month or so in, when we realized they didn't have any of these answers, we realized, well, this is just a scam. It's just a matter of just how wide and vast the scam is. But if the American Medical Association is now going to peddle trainee madness on an institutional level, which it currently is, here's what that means. It means pretty much every doctor that you would want to go to, every healthcare professional you would want to go to, that unless they have a moral and spiritual plumb line at work in their lives, is completely and totally worked over, or they're about to be. That's what it means. That's what it means. You're watching a veteran, decorated, accomplished scientist who has worked for the last now 6 presidential administrations, who knows more science than I deposited in the toilet bowl this morning. You're watching his deconstruction in real time because he got into this thinking he was going to do science and cure the world of the unenlightened. And then he got in. Now he's figuring out, oh, I'm just actually going to have to become a member of the unenlightenment. We're going back to the Dark Ages here. But he can't resist the urge to return to the science every so often. I remember when Chris Loesch, Dana Loesch's husband, was not allowed on a plane last year because he attempted to wear an N95 respirator instead of a cloth mask because they don't work. But they told him because it had one of the valves on there for filtration that he could not wear that mask on the plane. That's how nuts this has been the entire time. So if you've ever wondered, Michael Osterholm is a dinosaur. Not as imposing as a Tyrannosaurus Rex, not as swift or efficient a killer as a Velociraptor. Or is it Velociraptor?
Velociraptor.
Thank you. Okay. And not as cute and adorable as those big giant Brontosaurus Rexes just eating the leaves off the plants. But rest assured, he going extinct just the same. And so is science. You know, we've been talking about Rough Greens for quite a while now. It's that supplement powder that you sprinkle in with your dog's food so that all of the stuff that was taken out at the factory, the vitamins, minerals, nutrients, the antioxidants, the pre and probiotics, all that stuff goes right back in. You know, all the stuff that we buy so many supplements for to put back into our food because a lot of it's taken out of our food as well. Well, the same thing happens with your pet. That's why they need a supplement too. Now, you may be wondering though, How do I know my pet's going to like this? Do I want to bite the bullet for something they may not like the taste of? Well, here's one way to find out. What if we give you that first 14-day Jumpstart bag for free? You put in a couple bucks for the shipping, so you've got some skin in the game, okay? But we'll give you the bag for free just to get you started and see if you don't see a difference in your pet in 2 weeks or less when you go to roughgreens.com. That's RUFF for roughgreens.com. All you pay is the shipping at roughgreens.com or give them a call at 833-ROUGH-DOG, RUFF. All right, let's get to it here on Fake News or Not. I want to share with you, I had something originally planned for this segment today, and then I read this thread this morning when I got up. And I just thought, first of all, this is even long by my standards, so we'll zip through and get through as much of this as we can until I'm bored. But it's semi-autobiographical, and I didn't write it. I just read it. But it's an index of my own conscience for the last half dozen years, trying to figure out where is the truth. And for much of my career, I operated from a framework here on there were egregious examples of lies and distortions, what Dan Rather attempted before the 2004 election, for example. What Rolling Stone did with the Duke lacrosse story, right? But these things, when they were discovered, would be across the board. I mean, Dan Rather, his career would never recovered fully from that. When there was this level of distortion, even people within a biased industry said, no, we can't do things like that. There has to be a policing of that. And so I operated, when I got into this business 15 years ago, and until the last 5 or 6 years, I operated from the premise that the truth was still attainable within the mainstream of American media if you calculated for the bias, the ideological bias that was built in. Fair?
Yeah.
And so if you knew that the way that things were going to be presented were going to be from a certain ideological bias, it didn't mean that they were untrue or false. It just meant that the narrative was spin. And so you had to unspin it, but that at least the names and the data and the events occurred and would be accurate, even if the conclusions that were written within it were going to come from a certain point of view.
And on some level, they had to be good at the spin.
Yes. Like their spin had to hold up to some level of fact checking from people on our side. Correct. And over the years, I got to be friends with or know on a personal level reporters for places like the Washington Post and the New York Times, had them as guests in my home, understanding that they have a different belief system than I do, but we're being honest with each other about it. I have framed in my basement a fairly lengthy feature that the New York Times did on me in 2015. That is from its point of view, but it's pretty accurate portrait of me and how I operate and why. And that's why I have it framed in my man cave at home for everybody to go and read if they would like. I wouldn't let anybody now from any of those publications, no matter what our past history were, anywhere near my home today. I wouldn't even return their calls. How did I get here? Just me. I want to show you this thread that appeared on Twitter this morning. And this thing is Levitical in length and detail. So we'll go through it as much as we can and as quick as we can, but it won't take long for you to understand where this is going. It comes from a guy who bills himself as a centrist comedian. And he begins by asking, hey, you're struggling to understand why some people might be, I don't know, vaccine hesitant. You know, imagine you're a normal person. Let's go back to 2016. And you believe, rightly or wrongly, most of what you see in the media. You believe things like polls are reflective of public opinion. I mean, my goodness, how much time in my career have I spent breaking down polling and polling data and drawing my conclusions from it, right? Right, yeah. Now I just break down the polling, if you know what I'm saying. That's what, in the last election, I just broke down the polling, not the polling data, okay? You believe doctors and scientists are trustworthy and independent. You're watching Michael Osterholm go extinct in real time. We just talked about that, right? You're a decent, reasonable person. You follow the rules. You trust authority. And then imagine your shock when Brexit, which you were assured could never happen because it's a fringe movement led by racists, it actually did happen, even though the polls all said it was never going to happen. And then the pollsters, and the experts, they blow that off and say, these things happen. But then soon after Donald Trump is running for president, those exact same people told you there's no way he was going to win and he would lose. Some experts say he had a 99% chance of losing. So Hillary had a 99% chance of winning. And now the racist monster they told you could never get near the White House just so happens to be the leader of the free world. And you ask yourself, how did this happen? Except all the people in charge of informing you, they tell you it was the Russians. And as Aaron pointed out in his montage today, Chinese collusion is apparently a thing, right?
Yeah.
Peter Daszak, thank you very much. Copyright Peter Daszak, 2015. Okay. Then they tell you, hey, the Russians did Brexit and they got Trump elected too. Now the Russians couldn't adequately install toilets in the media hotel for the Moscow Olympics a few years ago, right? They couldn't do that.
They had issues.
Okay, they couldn't do that. But they single-handedly made Brexit and Donald Trump happen. That's apparently where they've diverted all their resources there in Mother Russia. So for the next 3.5 years, you watch as the media and the political class run with this Russian collusion narrative. They've got dossiers, whistleblowers. They've got peeing on prostitutes. So you're desperate for things to make sense again. And then the Mueller report comes out, and now we're going to set the world straight. And so imagine you're shocked then when you discover that Brexit and Trump had little to do with foreign meddling. The screaming about Russians and Brexit goes down and dies down in flames as well. And then you imagine bit by bit, you're discovering that the events which the media and political class told you would not and could not happen not only happened, but happened without some sort of evil third-party interference. You keep asking, how could this happen? Your new answer is the country's racist. So if you're white, this seems strange to you. Other than a handful of idiots, you've never really met anyone racist. If you're an ethnic minority immigrant, like the author of this Twitter thread, you think this seems even stranger. I mean, why would people in one of the most welcoming, tolerant countries in the world want to convince themselves against their own will their country is racist? But of course, the evidence is right there on your screen. After all, imagine your horror as you found out that a gay black actor is assaulted by MAGA hat-wearing thugs who racially abuse him and put a noose around his neck. He even cries while talking about it. Imagine your outrage as you see news reports of a bunch of MAGA hat-wearing kids from a religious school contemptuously confronting a Native American elder. Reza Aslan tells you that the kid has, quote, a punchable face. Let me tell you something. Reza Aslan knows a thing or two, brother, about punchable faces. Can I get a witness on that?
Amen.
All right. Imagine that for days you watch coverage of these events with expert after expert and pundit after pundit sharing and fueling your outrage. But then imagine soon after, however, the Jussie Smollett story turns out to be an attention-seeking hoax. Imagine that you quickly discover that the Native American elder was actually the one confronting the kids and not the other way around. If this is such a racist country, you ask yourself, why would they need to make up stories of racism? As you ponder this, you remember that for years now, you've been expected to go along with other make-believe. You're expected to believe whether male or female is not as simple as you once thought. Whatever you learned about biology at school is now wrong. Imagine reading that the experts at the American Psychological Association say that traditional masculinity is, quote, pathological and harmful, unquote. Imagine you still want to believe the media and their experts. And this, though, requires that you now think the country is racist, men are bad, and gender is a social construct, and we don't even know what that means. It is at this point in time now that a certain pandemic emerges on the other side of the world. You are initially concerned, but as scenes emerge, or unconcerned, but as scenes emerge from Italy and other countries, it's clear something big is happening. The racist Donald Trump shuts down travel from China. In response, the mayor of Florence advises citizens to fight racism by hugging a Chinese person. Shortly thereafter, Nancy Pelosi visits Chinatown in San Francisco to explain there's no reason tourists or locals should be staying away from the area because of coronavirus concerns. Thank God there's some terrible non-racist people who aren't overreacting, you say to yourself. Nonsense, you think to yourself, as you wonder how best to protect yourself and your family from this deadly disease. You consider getting masks. You've seen visitors from Asian countries wear them. But then the UK's chief medical officer tells you not to wear a mask and wash your hands instead. So you're proud to be doing your part. You're locked down. The first wave of the pandemic does not overwhelm the healthcare system because we're all in this together. Imagine your confusion as the same people who have spent 3 months telling you masks don't work and you shouldn't wear them introduce mask mandates. We're following the science, they tell you. This makes little sense, but a pandemic, of course, is no time to ask for questions. I could go on, but now we're getting into all kinds of things you all know. Because we're now into the period of time where I have been informationally radicalized by several of the events that led up to this period of time, and even some others, like Brett Kavanaugh, that he didn't even mention. Now, I have tweeted this thread in my Twitter timeline today. If you follow me on Twitter at Steve Deace Show, trust me. This thing is solid freaking gold. And it's long, but you want to get, so was Lord of the Rings. You want to get to the end. But this is a semi-autobiographical look, without a word of it being penned by me, of me. This discusses my own evolution, or some of you might consider it a devolution, over the last few years. How we ended up with a slogan 2 years ago of assume you're being lied to. Okay? How did I go from the guy criticizing some of my fellow conservative media personalities for not using the platforms of mainstream media to push back and to fight back and to get in the battle, right? Remember those conversations we had years ago, right? How did I go from that to, well, assume you're being lied to? Well, you just got a brief history of time of how that occurred. This is what's happened to me, and I'm guessing this is what's happened to a lot of you. Gentlemen, your thoughts?
It's Animal Farm in tweet form. There's such a landslide of reality in there that, again, there's just zero reason now for anybody with a Christian worldview to be thinking that we aren't at the bottom of the slippery slope. What next? The query about, when will it get so bad that no. We sprinted past that. We're way past. You are in the dystopia now. Please at least tell yourself that. Then, if it's a matter of the courage, you can't just find the courage to do what must be done. Okay, times are hard. But denying the reality of where you live right now, unacceptable. Absolutely unacceptable. This is a dystopian novel. That is the reality we live in.
And the people on the right who are just now coming around to what's been going on here the whole time, now that they waited, they told you to mask, told you to get vaccinated. And now San Francisco, where almost 90% of the population over the age of 16 is vaccinated, and yet they're going to announce a mask mandate today that apparently is to blamed on the unvaccinated. Okay, whatevs. They fell into this because they're late, Aaron, coming to this conclusion. They thought they could still trust their old buddy Scott Gottlieb, for example. They thought they could trust their old medical expert buddies, their old go-to sources. No. Sadly, you cannot.
Sadly, being the operative word there, in a lot of different ways. Not just from a victimized standpoint, but what we're really talking about here. I keep vacillating back and forth. Between a demonic manifestation and or God's judgment on a culture, on a people. But why not both. The unrestrained hand of the Almighty on a culture is what we see here on a daily basis. The same people who want to tell you that Laurel Hubbard is just the biggest hero for losing to a bunch of women at the Olympics are the same ones who say, yeah, we should mask again, or maybe get the booster shot, or Andrew Cuomo yesterday saying, worst case scenario, this vaccine or this virus mutates into something that's vaccine resistant, so we all need to get vaxxed again. What? There is nothing that is comprehensible here on a rational ground, on just any level, any depth or lack thereof of actual critical thinking. The only thing that rationalizes all of this, the only thing that rationalizes this entire thread, is a group of people possessed by the pursuit of power and control. Whatever they need to be true today in order to get more power and control over you is what is true. And it's always been true, and it will always be true. Tomorrow, if the opposite of that thing is what will help them get power, it was always true. It was true yesterday, it's true tomorrow. The progressive, I've said this before, and I don't think, I'll keep saying it, I'm not sure if folks understand that the modern progressive, they would rather control you than eliminate you. That's what we see. That explains all of this.
Dr. Robert Malone, the first to patent mRNA technology. He will be joining us here at the top of next hour for an interview you do not want to miss. Stay tuned.